This week on Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke, we welcome guest Tania Saiz, advocate, mindset facilitator, and neurodivergent artist, whose creations celebrate perfect imperfections. After surviving an ischemic stroke in August of 2020, Tania faced an overwhelming sense of disconnect. Mirrors became adversaries, and her own reflection felt like a stranger, fragile and unrecognizable. Yet, amidst this void, she began to rebuild. Through courage and patience, each moment of eye contact became an act of reconnection. What once reflected weakness grew into a mirror of strength and possibility. Tania's story is a journey from disconnection to profound connection with herself and her community, a testament to resilience, growth, and the beauty of rediscovery. Thank you for joining us for part 2, Tania Saiz interview.
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke. Stroke offers a powerful, life-changing shift in perspective. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. Beyond Stillness offers a moment of pause for storytelling and reflection. Ultimately, we create a welcoming environment that reveres the moment beyond stroke's paralysis. Still moments unite humanity and divinity. I'm your host, Molly Bucola. As we begin today, we take a moment to honor ways that wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope have shown up in our own recoveries. And we give thanks. Now, Tania Saiz interview. Tania, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for helping me discover it.
I love the way that you approach your recovery as a discovery. When you began your story, you kept using phrases that implied disconnect. You started by saying, "Where's my arm? Where's my hand?" And everything was so disorienting. Will you speak to us about the idea of disconnect through recovery?
Well, I think there are so many ways we become disconnected in having a stroke. In my particular case, there was the disconnect physically from parts of my body. There was also like emotional disconnect. There was a lot of needing to find my emotions and how to work with them, because there was a disconnect on how to regulate them. And in some cases, a disconnect on how to feel. I had a lot of numbness. I'm a very affectionate person. And I think one of the things that was a big struggle was wanting to give a hug when only one arm was working. And kind of feeling like I was sort of giving the hug. And then like this other arm was just sort of not really party to it. And then when I would start being able to move that arm to give hugs and not knowing where that arm was, if you've ever received a hug from me recently, I probably will say something like, I don't know where that arm is. So if I touch you somewhere inappropriately, I apologize in advance. Because I might be thinking I'm hugging you up by your like upper back, but that arm might just find its way down to your waist because I just can't tell
Uh-huh.
where it's at. I've stopped trying to look at it, right? I talk about that in my story. I try to stop looking to see what I'm doing and I want to feel the hug.
Yeah.
Going and hugging someone and closing my eyes and really giving them a hug means that I might lose track of wavy
Mm.
gravy, but I'm willing to take that chance to be able to live in the feelings again.
Yeah. Wavy gravy is what you call your arm and your hand together, right?
Yes, the whole thing.
The whole thing. That it's interesting to feel like we have to apologize before even going into a hug when we're a feeler.
Yes. I think I learned something a while ago that was interesting, and it was someone said that the pre-apology before speaking. And it was like I'm not sure if this is going to make sense to you kind of an apology. And their response was, and they're also somebody who had had a stroke, that only people with a brain injury apologize in advance for the potential that their thoughts might not make sense. Whereas the rest of the world just runs around like spewing nonsense and they never apologize at all.
Do you feel disconnect now in your life? And how do you address disconnect these days? You're 4 years since your stroke.
I would say that I feel far less disconnected, but it also might be that some of the places where I've grown have offered new opportunities to connect to different communities, for example. Like I'm still disconnected from my music family. I loved live music. It's something that was really important in my life, and I just can't handle it. So I can't go to a show without potentially having a panic attack or without a lot of pre-work and plans, and sensory overload is for real. So I do still feel disconnected, but I've resolved that maybe what I can't do is go to a show once a month, every week, however often I was doing it. And I more or less pick and choose where I think I'll be most successful and enjoy it, because I don't see a point for myself in going somewhere that I'm going to be uncomfortable or driven to a panic. So I've sort of, in all aspects, reprioritized. So in the places where I'm not yet reconnected, I'm patient with myself to say, okay, well, I can't do that right now, or I can't do 3 shows in a row, but maybe I'll pick the day I think I'll be most successful, or the day I think I'll see the most people that I can see. So taking advantage, like you and I were talking about before we started, was I'm in a place and maybe what the priority is about connecting with the people and surviving the music. But the disconnect, they still exist. I think it's just figuring out where, if you have places where you can connect, that is a reinforcement and it feeds you versus focusing on where it's depleting you.
Mm. Yeah, I was wondering the emotional side of that because there's often pain and grief. And what you're saying is one, having patience with yourself, and two, focusing on what you can do,
Yeah.
focusing on your connecting with the people more so than the music in ways that are not so overwhelming to you.
Yes, for sure. Somebody in one of my mindset groups said something once and it really stuck with me, which is, instead of about the action, what's the feeling? Kind of like in the practice of gratitude, it's not about the thing, it's not about the list of things, it's about what are you feeling and what is the feeling that you're getting. So in the same way, looking at something like going to see music, and really, was it about, I mean, I used to dance with my eyes closed, so it wasn't about seeing anything, it was definitely about hearing, but it was about the people. So if I
Mhm.
can flip my focus and make it about the people, is it that I'm in the ADA section? Is it that I have my earplugs in? What are the tools that'll support me to be there and really be able to maximize the good feelings with the people?
Mm. Mm-hmm. And you spoke about groups that you have connected with since your stroke, and those are about feelings too. Can you tell us a little bit about the groups, how you found groups, and how you found a deeper sense of connection and feel?
I will say I got lucky. I think one of the things that makes me sad is that it's true that every stroke is different. So it's very hard to give like a guidebook. But at the same time, I feel like there's so little support. Not to say it's an excuse, but it's like, oh, everybody's different. So we can't really help you. So it means nobody gets help, which means we all have to find each other by the grace of God, really. Like it's like luck, crazy Google searches, whatever gets you where you need to go. So I was really just lucky. I want to say I was lucky where I was pretty much the queen of very late night Google searching and anything else. What you put in is what you get out. So I would try different things. And I found at the time Clubhouse had come up as being something that people were using. And that's like a more of a, it was a social platform, but it was all audio. And they had a few groups a few times a week where stroke survivors would get together, and I just got lucky to happen into that space. And I was in observer mode. So I didn't talk at all. I didn't know how to talk in a group. I didn't know when to speak, when it was my turn. I didn't understand those cues. I couldn't grasp them just through audio, but I couldn't grasp them even in person with people. So I just felt awkward and I just stayed quiet. And I forget what group it was, but I was inspired to speak up. And it was probably the first time my voice was heard outside of my own head and outside of my own family. Then some beautiful friendships flourished because what you find is, I think when you're vulnerable enough to talk about what's going on and to talk about your weaknesses or to talk about what you're seeking help with, and you hear other people talk, you find that you're not alone. I think the biggest burden we can carry is to think that what we're going through is wholly on us. Like no one else has ever experienced what we're going through. And while each of our journeys is absolutely unique, I think when we start to talk to others who have had a similar path, even if it's not the exact same one, you find enough in there in those conversations that alleviates that burden to say, oh, something similar happened to that person and this is what they did, and it may not be your cure, it may not be your solution, but it really takes away that feeling of being alienated and this is like happening to me, only to me, and there is no one who can help me at all.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen people in groups that show up and don't say anything and listen. We're happy they're there and we're always wondering what's going on in their heads. And then month 3, month 4, they'll speak up and you're like, we're so thankful that you're sharing. It's such a gift when someone is able to voice their perspective within a group. You use the term in your story, introverted observer dragged to a party. So, how about for the people who have had the courage to get themselves to the party, to get themselves to the groups, to listen, but haven't quite spoken up yet? What's your suggestion for those people, or for you when you were in that situation? What did you need to hear?
I think it's about being okay with that to
Mm,
begin with and just being patient, because being there, being present is huge.
mm-hmm.
Showing up to a group for 3 months and not necessarily sharing is a huge commitment to yourself and to the people in that group. So that should be just
Yes.
100% acknowledged and applauded. And what you're taking and learning in that space. And like, I forget where I was, but it was like the lesson was about being a good audience member. So being a thoughtful listener for others is something that not everyone is capable of.
Mm-hmm.
So even just acknowledging that for oneself to say, I'm here and I'm being present and helping make space for others, even though I'm not ready yet, is a huge gift that you're giving. And I would say when the right conversation happens that will bring you to the table to share, you will share. When the time is right, it will happen. And it's okay that it takes time to get there.
Mm,
Um, there's nothing wrong with that.
mm. I hear so much grace, so much compassion, so much patience. You are being a beautiful best friend to yourself and to all of us who you're talking to right now. That gift of patience, and it's okay to be you in whatever way you are you right now. Show up as you. What does trust mean to you these days? In your story, you spoke about not being able to trust your body, and then also looking in the mirror, not quite trusting who you saw looking back at you. You're 4 years out now. What does trust mean to you these days?
I feel like trust in this situation is a lot like faith,
Mm,
where I have to give myself the space to try to bring both arms up and delight if I open my eyes and they happen to be in the same position. Uh,
delight.
yeah. Well,
I
yeah,
love
like,
that word.
and almost not try as hard. The faith in all of the work that's been put in for 4 years. If I continue to keep questioning and keep presuming that it's not improved or that it's not going to be level or what have you, that puts a whole other level of energy into it that might not have been there. So, really, just trusting in everything that I've learned about myself, all the work that I've put into myself physically, emotionally. Let's be clear, I do not always exhibit patience or grace. I have moments of emotional dysregulation. I have times where I feel the flooding happening and I am in a fight or flight. That happens still. So there's by no means I've not reached a point where that is not an imminent threat at any point. But I just trusting that everything's going to be okay, trusting in a bigger thing. I spend a lot of time micromanaging the small things and wanting to know that this piece of me was going to be back online, or how is this part of my recovery going? And it's really just allowing the entirety of myself to coexist and have the room that I need to just take a breath, take a minute, and just experience successes or failures, opportunities to learn, whatever it might be.
Huh. Trusting the process
Yeah.
and focusing on the little details. And if they don't all go right, giving yourself some space and thinking it's about the process in its entirety. Yeah. In the early days, you didn't recognize yourself. In what ways do you feel that you're living your true self right now? Living with integrity, feeling alive. In what ways do you feel like you're honoring your soul at this point in your recovery?
Oh, such a big question. I think reprioritizing made a big difference. I went back to work really soon. I went back to work 6 months after my stroke. I really had no business doing that. I think I didn't know any better. It just seemed like everybody wants you to go back to being normal, whatever that is. If you worked, then work is normal. And so I did. And then they were really just happy that I was alive and it was all well and good. And then slowly but surely they wanted more than that. And soon the demands were outpacing my recovery, and we were no longer compatible. What I was capable of and what my job demanded were just not the same anymore. And I took a medical leave because I had started to re-experience symptoms that I had no longer had. And it really forced me to reprioritize. I literally had to go back into therapies like full time. There was a lot that went down, but then it was like, what am I doing beyond this? And something that had been really important to me prior was volunteerism. And how I used to volunteer, one of the ways was to register voters at concerts and music festivals. You can imagine that was probably not going to be happening for me. I did stuff that was behind the scenes, but for a while I did volunteer at one show. I remember I volunteered at a Broadway show that was registering voters, but it really was not going to be how I was going to be able to get involved. So looking at what was going to give me purpose, because I think in our recovery, having a purpose, whatever it may be, think of it literally as a reason to get up in the morning. So it's not about this higher order purpose. Literally, is my purpose to raise a good dog? What's my purpose? What makes me have motivation for my day to day? So one of those things in volunteering was finding the right organizations to volunteer with. So now I'm an arts ambassador for our local arts council, for example, and that helps feed my creative self. I volunteer for the American Heart Association. I volunteer a lot. I volunteer with Love Your Brain. Beautiful part of it is that it allows me to be connected to people, and it allows me to do it how I can, what is available to me to give. Because as a volunteer, it's really up to you how you get involved. And it's not something that is a demand. So it allows for that ebb and flow that happens when maybe we're cognitively overloaded or we're fatigued. So volunteering has provided a way for me to be involved in the greater community and give back to the communities that are important to me in a way that supports me as well as provides support to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about it, you do sound fully alive. I love listening to you talk about facilitating your mindfulness groups and connecting others in a way that they can work towards something bigger. And with volunteering, there's always something for someone.
Yeah, you can always find, and I encourage people to find something that nonprofit organizations live and breathe with volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
So there really is something for everyone. And it's just a beautiful way, again, to just be connected to others. Because I think you mentioned this to me when you read my story about just isolation. So one great way to come out of our shadows of recovery might be to volunteer.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before that you're an artist and you went to art school. How has art aided your recovery process?
It's funny because art originally was like my nemesis in that I worked in a creative field. I worked in marketing and I really felt stunted. After the stroke, I really had a hard time connecting to that part of me. So, ironically enough, it was after a concussion that I gave myself a break from all things and I just sat with some paint and I literally just started painting shapes and then outlining the shapes and then making patterns in those shapes. And it started as such a small, easygoing endeavor that opened up this whole world for me because I was committed to not allowing technology in my life to give myself recovery because the concussion brought back some stroke symptoms that I hadn't had in a long time. It really freaked me out. So I was like, okay, brain, we're resting and we're going to just do something really mellow. And it was very therapeutic. It was very small and intentional and without a lot of fanfare. And that's grown into a practice where I create every day. I have been able to really find my own style and create an interesting group of work and been showing in some galleries. And I've had,
Wow.
yeah, leaning into whatever being an artist is.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And also, that goes back to what you were saying about volunteering. You have found a space within a community that you can share your individual talent and be part of a community. In your story, you spoke about looking in the mirror. And sometimes in recovery, it's hard to look in the mirror, and some people avoid mirrors. And you were courageous and engaged yourself in the mirror, even when it was difficult. What are your suggestions to people who are still avoiding the mirror?
Hate the mirror. Still secretly hate the mirror. No, I think is important because, again, knowing that it's not just you, this is something that's common is important. I think it's almost like goes back to that idea of where you're choosing to focus. So if you're looking in the mirror and the focus is on noticing how my smile isn't the same, or I have weakness in the muscles in my cheek, or if I'm looking at how my eyes are different, if I'm looking at all of that, the mirror is no picnic. But if I'm wanting to celebrate my new haircut, or I'm super excited because I made a good choice in the necklace that I just bought. Or I look in the mirror and actually there's like this amazing bird behind me. What are we choosing to focus on when we have that opportunity? And the mirror ended up being a super useful tool when I stopped trying to use it differently. When I let the tool guide how the mirror was meant to be in my life, then the mirror became less of an obstacle and more of a support and less of an enemy. Even with my trainer, when she'd say, stop looking down, look up, I would actually be more stable, for example, looking down. When I started to look up, instead of looking myself in the eye or focusing on something that was behind me that I could see reflected, I would look at the wonkiness of me, and that would throw me off. So when I started to actually say, okay, this is a tool, she's telling me to look there because it has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with my stroke, has nothing to do with, it's not, this is what she tells all of her people. There's a benefit here. So I started to ask her, why do you want me to look in the mirror? Let's tell me why I should look in the mirror, because I have all these reasons why I don't want to look in the mirror. It was really just about your center of gravity. It's so simple. It was all about the center of gravity and how your body is situated. Oh, that's so practical. And that allowed me and freed me from the judgment of how I was in there, where I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's a logical reason. I shall do this now. And the more I started to communicate with myself visually that way, the more the tasks I was doing became easier. And then as the pendulum shifted and I was like, oh, this is actually helping me. Maybe when I started to see how it was helpful versus how I was carrying my own weight around it, it helped.
How has it been helpful in reconnecting with your emotional side and the true you?
It's interesting because I don't know if both eyes are really present the way I perceive them to be, but I definitely know how I perceived that distance happening between them. There's sometimes I was looking at myself in the mirror recently and I was like, do I see you as equal? But I don't look at it that way anymore. So the first time I was trying to see what I was seeing, because I think I've been more comfortable and allowing myself to just exist and live it. And you and I spoke once about when you're drawing, if you're drawing the person who's ahead of you and you're looking at all of the ways that the lines connect their features, you'll draw a fairly accurate picture of them. But if you're like, oh, I've got to draw this person's eyes, and you start to draw the eyes, you draw what your brain thinks an eye looks like, not what that person's eye looks like. So I think in the same way, it was almost softening the gaze, not looking so harshly, and just leaving a little bit of space for living and feeling versus the observing. So it depends on what side of the brain your stroke is on, but the very rational and the very data oriented part of me was intact while the rest of me was a little bit broken. So that person, that part of my brain was like, we'll take care of you. And it became a very controlled environment for safety reasons. And it wasn't a fun loving, free environment. I was living very cautiously. And I think back to your question about trust, that slowly as trust started to build in how I could engage the environment, that part of thinking of how I was going to engage the environment could slow down a little bit to allow me to live.
I love your word soften. You begin to soften your gaze in the mirror. And again, looping back to what you said about trust, trusting the overall process so that in the moment, those little details, if they don't go exactly as planned, understanding, trusting, having faith that the long journey is unfolding in the way that it's supposed to unfold. Yeah. Tania, I love listening to you talk. Thank you so much for taking time today and throughout the past couple months in order to craft your story and to share it with our community. And for all the time that you give to our community as a whole with a lot of different organizations also, and your artistic outlook. I love what you said about trust and softening and the mirror and the way that you used your words for this story. It's just brilliant and artistically crafted. It's beautiful. I love meeting with you each week. So thank you for being you.
Oh, Molly, you warm my heart. Honestly, you found it. You were listening and your curiosity led us here. You drove our homework and you were like, what's here? You really give such a gift. It's so magical. And honestly, this has been one of the most incredible life experiences that I have had and could have dreamt of. So thank you for really helping me find my story and share that. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Tania. Storytelling empowers us to share our experiences in a way that invites others to reflect on their own. In closing, we offer reflection questions as an opportunity to spark dialogue with yourself, friends, family, or fellow stroke survivors. In a moment, I will read questions aloud, and you can also find them written in the podcast episode description. Now, community conversation prompts. What has helped you rebuild your sense of self post-stroke? And what are some small ways you've noticed your confidence growing since your stroke?
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org. Another way to support is to like, share, or subscribe to our weekly show.
Thank you for listening to Part 2, Tania Saiz interview. For the full story, please listen to Part 1, Tania Saiz story. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. In this week's episode of Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke, Tania's journey reminds us of the power of connection, starting with ourselves. Through her courage to face the unfamiliar and rediscover her reflection, Tania has shown us how resilience and self-acceptance can open doors to deeper connections. As you go forward this week, consider the ways that you connect with yourself, your loved ones, and the world around you. Every glance, every moment of eye contact holds the potential to rebuild and strengthen bonds. Thank you for listening, and remember, as part of the stroke community, you are more than supportive. You are inspirational. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with others and consider donating to Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke.
If you are part of the stroke community and have a story you'd like to share on the show, please contact us. Email molly@beyondstillness.org.